Morita.
Mr. Pat Morita. Oh, yeah.
Pat Morita, ladies and gentlemen.
Lenny Bruce's mother named him the Hip Nip, but he hung on because now all of a sudden he had an angle.
He would tend to do the same show over again. And then he couldn't figure out why he wasn't getting laughs.
I don't think he paid much attention to the rules of the game. You know, kind of did what he wanted to do.
He really embraced the things that many of us run away from. He ran to it.
He had a lot of inner demons. He struggled a lot with depression, and he was drinking too much. I think he was doing too much drugs.
He was drinking so much that I went to the line producer and said, I'm scared to death he's going to fall off a cliff.
And he was stumbling and he fell flat on his face.
That was when it really, really hit home and he realized, I've got a big problem.
Kevin.
Hello, how are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Man, I finished a documentary this morning because I wanted to freshen my mind. And I have to tell you right away, I'm one of those Gen X kids that Happy Days was my life. I was, 10 years old.
Right, me too. Me
yeah,
too.
I mean, I can't believe how much that show shaped my childhood, and Laverne and Shirley and all that. But I've always loved Pat Morita. I've always remember him from Don Knotts, from The Shakey's Gun in the West, and watching him on MASH. I mean, he was there for my whole childhood,
Right,
and then of course
exactly.
being 16 for a Karate Kid, but never knowing anything about him, and being a Las Vegas native, I knew he was a stand-up comedian. I knew he lived here in town. So your documentary, I love how it showed not only success as a career, but also the hardships of his childhood, the hardships, and you humanized him. And I think that was really important. You made a documentary that just didn't show the rosiness of his life.
Right. Well, thank you. Thanks for saying that. That's really important. Yeah, me too. I grew up watching Happy Days. I mean, just early on, I did an interview with Don Most. I mean, back when I was 10 years old, I was watching Happy Days. I mean, who would have known that, when I'm in my, 50s right now, I'd be doing an interview with Don Most from Happy Days. It's like unbelievable, the stuff that's happening. I never realized how much interest is on Pat Morita. I mean, since the trailer came out, we're getting tons and tons of interest and interviews and stuff like that. So I'm happy that's actually happening for him.
Yeah, because Cobra Kai has just re-sparked everything.
That's
it's a phenomenon. It really is. And the tribute that they pay to his character throughout the series was just handled so well, and it was so proper.
Right. We got lucky but when we started shooting this, the Cobra Kai wasn't even in production. We started shooting this back in 2016. I think Cobra Kai went in production 2017. So when we had interviewed Ralph, it was basically they were getting ready to shoot the first season. And he was telling me that, it's really important that we incorporate Pat's history and Pat's life into the Cobra Kai series. So I'm glad that they did that. I don't know if you've seen the third series of Cobra Kai. There's like one episode that he goes back to Okinawa and they pay tribute to Pat and all that stuff. So it's good. I mean, people that are in our age, like 40s and 50s, they know Pat Morita, but the kids that are in their teens and 20s, now they're getting to know who Pat Morita is and how important he was to the Karate Kid series.
And how did you choose Pat for your documentary? How did you get involved with this? Was this a long time coming?
You know what? I've done a documentary back in 2015. It was called The Real Miyagi. So I'm kind of stuck in the whole Miyagi and Karate Kid world. It was about Karate Master Fumiya Demura. It was back in 2015, and he was the stunt double who did all the fights and stuff for Pat Morita. They were the same height and they kind of looked the same and all that stuff, and they became really good friends. So I went to interview Pat Morita's wife in Vegas, and after the interview, she started telling me all these stories about Pat, how he suffered tuberculosis and internment camps and all this stuff, and how his father died. And, all those stories stuck with me. And then a year later, when the documentary came out on Netflix, she called me up. She said, "Oh my God, this was great. It made me emotional and all that stuff." And that's when I told her, "What do you think about doing a documentary on Pat?" But in the beginning, she wanted to do a narrative. She wanted to do a narrative feature, not a documentary. And I said, well, if you do a documentary and when it comes out, it gains interest and momentum that, we can see that there is interest on Pat, it's easier for us to get the funding and all that to do a narrative. So she agreed. So basically, we started like 4 years ago, and the other thing was Pat. When Pat back in 1996, he started writing a manuscript on his life, like all the experiences that he had and stuff like that. But he wasn't able to complete it. Like he probably finished, I would say, up until like the early 1990s, and then when he passed away, he asked, before he passed away, he told Evelyn, if anything were to happen to me, can you turn this into a book or something and get this story out there? Because if I can help one poor soul with my addiction, that would have been, make it all worth it. So in a way, by us doing the documentary, she kind of fulfilled the Pat's wishes. So that's how that came to be about.
Yeah, and having her blessing was probably great for you because that gave you access to film, videos, photos. I mean, you just had a treasure trove of Pat's life in this documentary.
Right. She has tons and tons of photos. I remember the first day when we went to her house, she had like boxes all over the place. And I said, what is all this? It took us at least like 6 months to go through all the photos, through all the stuff. So she had like VHS photos, high 8 and all that stuff. So I slowly transferred them. But the only thing that I was lacking was his early life, like, the time that he was a child till probably like the early 70s. That's when I kind of, because my story changed, because all the people that we were going to interview, no one really knew about his early life. And the people who did, they've already passed away, unfortunately. So I had to resort and to like old interviews that he's done. I went to like TV Legends and I talked to them, see if I can use the interview. So yeah, majority of the stuff came from Evelyn, and the stuff that I couldn't get, I went on IMDb and I did the research and I hit up the people who had footage, but there were so many other things that I just couldn't get a hold of, or they wanted just way so much money for it that it wouldn't have been worth it. But I hope I was able to tell the story with what I had,
Well, I think what was incredible in the documentary was using his own voice for the narration. It just, you found him talking about his past life, talking about everything, and it's like he was there. I mean, that was really cool.
Right. Thank you. I wish I had more of that stuff. And I wish he was alive so I could ask him the questions that I really wanted to. Like, why drinking, why this, why that. But unfortunately, he wasn't there. And, and a lot of people that knew him, for some reason, they didn't want to speak about him. So I was kind of limited on how I could tell the story. And that's the reason it took this many years to do, because we had so many different versions. And I said, I think this is the best route to go with his own narration. And then once it gets to the 70s, we find people who are, that knew him.
And everyone you interviewed, all the actors and people and friends and family, they knew about his demons, they knew about his drinking and everything, but the incredible love for him, no matter what. I mean, it's just shown through in this documentary that they just loved and adored him.
Right, they do. Everyone has love for him. I mean, whoever I talked to, the first thing that they started out saying, he was such a kind person, kind-hearted person. He would donate his time to like the children's hospital because he could relate to all that stuff. Because when he was a child, he spent most of his life, like from ages 2 to 11, in a hospital. So he could relate to all these kids. So he would, like Christmas time, he would take kids presents and stuff like that. So that's like the first thing that came out of people's mouth. They just had nothing but good things to say.
Well, Kevin, congratulations on More Than Miyagi. He definitely was, and it was definitely a love letter to him. And thank you for joining me, and let's talk again soon.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was nice talking to you.
You bet. Take care.
All right, take care. Bye.